Hello and welcome. My name's Jamie Willey. I'm the Business Development Director here at Tribal Worldwide. I help lead the ideation and creation of strategies and propositions for the new clients considering to partner with us. Tribal Worldwide, for those of you who haven't heard of us, is the total experience agency. And what we mean by that is we think beyond the established customer experience and work with brands to innovate in their customer journeys, from online to offline, out of home and in store, as well as internal engagement in processes and procedures. And ultimately, so we look to create ecosystems that build better products, services, communications, but ultimately better businesses. And these events help us do that by bringing together industry leaders from a diverse range of sectors and companies to provide new points of view and learn from each other on how we can deliver new, better and more total experiences that change the face of businesses today to better serve your customers and deliver more value. So our latest event series is exploring the effects of Covid-19 on consumer behaviour, specifically what it means now as well as in the future, and what that can mean for the new normal, I suppose. In order to understand what the future may hold, not just for the UK, but globally, across this series, we're going to be speaking to those leading strategies from not just ourselves here at Tribal Worldwide London, but from agencies across our DDB Worldwide network in countries who are sort of behind where we are in the UK from a pandemic perspective, as well as in front of us and in line with us. Hopefully, the idea of this will be to aggregate the similarities and polarities being faced geographically by businesses. So today we'll be discussing consumer behaviours in the now, and how, for example, they've changed so rapidly around shopping and online behaviours, and how we've already started to see consumer relationships with brands starting to pivot and shift and evolve. So we're really fortunate today to be joined by three senior consumer behaviour experts from the DDB network. First of all, we have our very own Darren Savage, our Chief Strategy Officer here at Tribal Worldwide London. Darren has over 20 years experience in the marketing industry, working across a number of top agencies in the UK and globally. He's led projects for Nike, Volkswagen, O2, PlayStation, just to name a few. And he's also a lecturer at the Said Business School at the University of Oxford, and the Advertising and Marketing Department at the University of Lancaster. So as well as being a professional, is also a very learned academic as well. We're also very lucky to be joined from our colleagues from DDB Russia. We have Anastasia Kim, who's the head of strategy there, a Moscow-based senior brand strategist with over 14 years experience in communication planning and brand development, working across a wide range of business sectors and consumer segments. She's a passionate, results-orientated and accelerating business transformation professional, constantly adapting to the latest trends and technologies. And her colleague who joins us is Alexandra, who's a strategist at DDB Russia, with 2.5 years experience in the advertising industry in DDB Russia, working for clients such as McDonald's, Skoda, Lipton, Royal Canin, and specialises on multicultural features, as she's lived in 6 countries, including the UK, Australia, Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and the Ukraine. So really nice to sort of get that sort of spread of global experience on the call today.
Thank you, Jamie, for invitation. Yeah, really thrilled to join this seminar. So thank you.
Thanks very much. So as I've said, for those that have joined whilst I've been doing that intro there, we want this to be nice and interactive. So please submit any questions in the chat box as we go through. We're going to make this really nice and conversational and hopefully cover off some points that you'll find interesting. And also for those that aren't familiar with Zoom, again in the top right, there's a way you can there's a way you can sort of adapt the gallery view if you'd like to change how you're seeing us there. So, really just wanted to start off with a bit of a kind of a opening thoughts, to be honest with you, before we jump into kind of the points that we've captured as a team. Alexandra, I don't know if you wanted to start off just sort of point of view from what you guys are experiencing at the moment in Russia, how that's affecting how you've been working with your clients, and just get a sort of opening point of view from you there.
Yeah, of course. So basically in Russia, the government is enacting very actively on what's going on with coronavirus. So it's all on businesses, on people, and the mayors of the cities. So for brands now, it's really an opportunity to sort of stand out and have a chance to help people, to support them. And therefore, we're working with the brands and helping them to establish this communication with consumers so that the clients could sort of stand out and bring something helpful to them. So yeah, basically we are now on we are for 1 month on the quarantine. So now people are getting slightly used to it. So now they're really expecting brands to do something for them because their habits are changing.
Yeah, and in terms of the workspace, it became even faster, and we are coming like every day with a new initiative, like one initiative per day for our different clients, and we never work so intense, and even I think it's a great opportunity to connect with a network as well, because previously we never had so many connections within our network, DTB network. So it's a great opportunity to exchange best practices in terms of how we help brands to react to the crisis.
I think that's really interesting, Anastasia, and I have to echo that here in the UK as well. We're seeing such heightened activity from our clients, all wanting to respond really quickly to this, and I must say we've been extremely busy as well, and very, very. It's nice that this has prompted collaboration across our group as well. So thank you very much. And Darren, from the UK's perspective, I know you've been really busy working with some of our key clients at the moment. What have you been sort of seeing in this immediate term reaction here in the UK?
Well, there's a few things. I think initially a lot of clients panicked, quite frankly, about what was going on, because I think for the first time in at least a century, I think people's behaviour is being kind of imposed on them at a mass scale. I mean, if any of the people watching this, if you've read anything about behaviour change or behavioural economics or anything along those lines, you'll know that changing people's behaviour is very, 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 very difficult. And you can maybe change it for a short amount of time, but often people then kind of flip back. And that's often seen around things like getting people to kind of quit smoking. It's quite difficult to get people to do that. And I think what's happened is the very large parts of the entire planet have now been pushed into quite radical behaviour change. And I think this has caused a lot of sort of psychological issues for people, if nothing else, because most people don't like change. We resist change. We don't like it because people are cognitive misers. We don't really like to have to think about things. We like things to be made easy for us. We use social cues to define our behaviour. What are the norms of behaviour? How do you look for groups of people who look like us to work out what we should do? And brands can play a role in that. I think what I'm now seeing is our clients are now coming to us and saying, right, okay, and they're now starting to think a bit more strategically, and they're saying, okay, well, we don't want something that is just going to be a very, very kind of short-term solution. We don't want something which is kind of superficial. We don't want to do something which is kind of insensitive to the way that people are now feeling. We want to try to come up with something that's kind of meaningful and is appropriate for our business. And ideally, because Tribal primarily works around kind of technology and design and innovation and things of that nature, we want something that when the lockdown finishes, we've got something which is complementary with the way that we normally do business, the normal ways that we offer people different ways to understand about our products and services and buy them and consume them and what have you. So I think we've moved quite rapidly, I think, which is a good thing, through the initial phase where I think there was a kind of culture shock. And now I think our clients are now starting to ask much more kind of interesting strategic questions about what's going on. And I think there were brands who went quite early. And I think there was a lot of debate around, for example, McDonald's separating the arches. And some people said, oh, well, that's nice. But a lot of other people said, well, it's just superficial nonsense. So I think brands are a little bit cautious about doing something that could be interpreted as being superficial or insensitive. And I think the first thing that we're saying to our clients is you've got to realize that a lot of the orthodox views about how people felt and behaved, temporarily at least, are probably not going to be true. So you've really got to get to grips and understand your audiences, and then look at what you're currently doing and what you're currently planning. And is that kind of appropriate for the current reality on the ground? And maybe some of those behaviors will become more permanent as lockdowns dissipate and we'll return to whatever normal looks like in the future.
Really interesting, Darren, and Alexandra as well. You know, that initial sort of influx and sort of that sort of you know, curve, if you like, of brands sort of really responding quickly, because consumers were also having to respond really quickly, and now kind of seeing people ease into that a little bit. Where would you say you guys are at in that sort of journey at the moment? Are people still sort of really getting used to this new way of life, or do you see consumers they've adapted now and they're now kind of iterating, and brands are kind of responding to that? Where are you at in that journey?
I'd say we're somewhere more to the start of it. So people just started to adapt, and brands just starting to understand how to provide people something that they need, like so that they feel that they're still comfortable even though they're staying at home. So we have this really active thing in terms of the beauty industry, because there was a research where people were asked where would they go first after the quarantine will finish, and one of the top places are those hair salons, basically everything related to beauty and spa, because people are really in need of still, you know, being nice and presentable. And there is an example of that beauty industry case, which is going on now. For example, one hair salon started to send for a certain price mixes of hair color. So basically those professional mixes, they premix them and then they send them to clients so that they can refresh their hair color at home. So they're trying to sort of help people to work with what's going on, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that helpfulness thing is really interesting, and I think some brands and some organisations, because of their underlying operational structures and the way that their organisation operates, has been able to innovate very, very quickly and be helpful. So one of my favourite current examples is from Starling, which is one of the newish startup banks like Monzo and what have you. And they have created a kind of a connected account. So if you are, an elderly person or a key worker and you can't get to the shops, you can create essentially a digital card via an app that you preload with a certain amount of money, and then your carer or next door neighbour can go and buy your groceries for you on their behalf. And that's just a very, very useful thing, but it's entirely in keeping with the way that the Starling brand has been operated, about making things very, very simple, very immediately. You know, the startup process for signing up for a new account with Starling takes a couple of minutes, and you'll do it via an app. It really does embarrass the more traditional banks. So that's a really, really nice example of where they've looked at a problem at the moment, which is some people can't get to the shops because they're self-isolating. How can we innovate in a way that enables that problem to be solved? So it's a really lovely kind of example of where an organisation is using its existing infrastructure and has done something which is really kind of helpful. The other thing as well that I've seen as well, if I won't do it now, but if I sort of look at my emails, we seem to have gone through the phase now where I'm getting lots of emails from really concerned chief executives talking about how concerned they are about my health and mental well-being and all the rest of it. And now organisations are starting to acknowledge that people, even after a couple of weeks, people are really adaptable. And we're creating home offices, we're creating homeschooling environments, we're spending more time at home. And searches for DIY has gone through the roof on Google. But other people are going with it, and they're saying, okay, well, if I'm going to live in my home, I want to create kind of domestic hedonism. So it's how can I create this amazing environment that I'm going to be stuck in for the next month, 2 months, or whatever it happens to be. So, you know, on one level, you're seeing really obvious things like John Lewis, for example, having the home edit, so you can create a really nice kind of working environment. Or how to make sure that if you set up a home office, you're not wrecking your back because you're sitting in a weird kind of position. So, you know, some brands are able to kind of adapt and extend what they're doing. What other examples have you got in Russia in terms of brands who have? The other point, it seems like it's a lot of the innovation seems to be coming from smaller organizations and sort of startups or individuals. I think brands are still trying to work out what they should be doing, which is kind of appropriate. And some of those things are held back because of their legacy systems. So a lot of the really nice innovation ideas about helping people come to terms with what's going on and connecting and reconnecting are not really coming from big organizations. They're coming from smaller organizations or kind of individuals who are just going out there and doing interesting sort of things.
Now that you've told about innovations, actually the thing which came to my mind is that the entrance hall in the houses of those Russian houses became sort of a new touch point. So because people mainly go out on short distances just to get food or to throw away trash, this is the place where they don't spend the most of their time there, but they are sort of slowed down and they are there for the most of the time. So there is a grocery store which specializes on like semi-healthy food, which people used to go to when they wanted a healthy snack or something nice. So what they did, they've installed vending machines in those entrance halls so that people don't have to go out, but they still have a chance to buy their favorite snacks, because these grocery store is not everywhere. So there's maybe not a chance to, you know, go to the proper store, but you could still go there.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, I think that's a lovely example. I think the other sort of thing that we're seeing is the people's. I think one of the big points of disruption that's happened is people's kind of. It's an obvious point, this, but I think a lot of the research that we're seeing coming from the big research groups like Ipsos and Canton, what have you, we're in the very, very early phases of this. So the time period within which we are looking at changes to consumer behaviour is very, very limited. So I think there's a cautionary note about not being too quick to jump to conclusions about short-term temporary behavioural shifts which have been imposed upon people and how those are going to translate into the long term. But I think what's interesting is people are looking to sort of replicate their daily rituals and routines and things that they are interested in. And Alexandra and I were talking yesterday about it's an obvious idea, but it's a nice one from Nike, where they've made all of their Nike training stuff free. And then they've kind of curated things that you can do at home. And those are all sorts of exercises around cardiovascular stuff, different types of fitness, conditioning, strengthening type things. And my wife's doing a project for Nike at the moment around kind of post-pregnancy fitness to help get your body back in shape in a way which is appropriate and so on. And I know that if you go on the Nike website at the moment around the training app, they haven't launched it yet, but they're now starting to look at kind of mental well-being and dietary requirements and things of that nature. So you can really look after yourself at home, because a lot of the things that people would normally do, the routines and the rituals have been, at least for the time being, have been blown out of the water. So in addition to those brands like Starling being helpful, I think there's also some really nice responses from brands which are enabling people to replicate or adapt routines and rituals that they enjoyed doing back in home. Another example that I signed up to recently is from Secret Cinema, and they've now got Secret Sofa. So I think the film which is on tomorrow is Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a great film. And again, they're trying to replicate the interactive experience at home by saying, right, you've got to get dressed up and go and get the gin martinis on the go and so on. So I think brands which are helping people from a routine point of view, it is also kind of an interesting trend that seems to be developing. I think, Alexandra, you had a few other examples from your market that I thought were quite good that you sent over earlier.
Yeah, we actually also have quite a lot of fitness companies and gyms who also created online trainings, even though they weren't even presented online before, but they switched to online so that people have a chance to train with their fitness trainers and other people. And I think the most interesting case here is Cycle Gym. So they have those cycle workout equipment, and they rent it out so that people don't have to buy their own. They rent it out for a symbolic price, and then you connect online and you train with other people and with the trainer as if you were at that cycling gym. Mm-hmm. Or you talked about mental health. We've recently had Delivery Club, which is something like Uber Eats in Russia. It connected with a psychological company which provides help, psychological help, mental health, everything. You can order a meal, and at the same time you can have psychological help. So it's like you're basically eating, you're having lunch, and you can at the same time discuss with a psychologist if you have any problems or if you're a bit stressed because of what's happening around. So there's some sort of a very comforting atmosphere they're creating.
Right. So there's sort of some innovations around kind of converging different things around a lot of these new kind of emergent needs we were talking about a little bit earlier around kind of, you know, uncertainty and stress and anxiety and what have you. I think one of the other things which is really obvious is for certain categories, kind of online shopping has gone through the roof quite significantly. And I was looking at some global reports, particularly looking at countries like China and Hong Kong or what have you, just to see whether there were any indications that those countries where the number of new COVID cases was starting to decline and governments or particular regions were easing some of the lockdown, one of those kind of behaviours that had been imposed upon people because of the lockdown had kind of persisted. And there seems to be some early evidence that that is the case. So I think there was a report from Business Insider and kind of eMarketer, and they looked at the kind of the Italian market and the Chinese market. And perceptually, at least, around 50% of kind of Chinese customers who had used online for the first time said, do you know what, I really like this, I'm going to keep doing it. And it's sort of slightly different situation in a different culture, but even Italians, there was around about, I think this is around about 35% of people said, I will now incorporate kind of online grocery shopping into the way that I just go about it, in addition to going to the market. So I think whilst I said at the beginning that it's too early to predict what's going to happen in the future and how many of these behaviours that we are now seeing are going to be maintained once the lockdown kind of eases and turn into kind of proper long-term behaviour shift, we're starting to see a little bit of evidence. And I think the obvious implication of that, and we've been working with two of our bigger kind of clients around this, is accelerating a lot of their e-commerce and kind of online marketing side projects that they'd put on hold because they were looking at the bricks and mortar side of things. And, you know, one of the things that we've been developing for Volkswagen is essentially a kind of remote test drive. You can't really go for a test drive at the moment. So there's an idea that was a very, very small idea that I think Skoda had, where you could do a kind of walk around. So you can get on your computer at night and you could essentially do a kind of live Q&A with a mechanic or an expert, and they could tell you about Skodas. And now they've sort of turned that idea into a much kind of bigger, interesting way. You can essentially go for a test drive sitting next to someone and ask them kind of questions, and then we're going to put cameras around the car so you can look around it. So it's interesting that a lot of companies are now looking at what was a kind of a side project, and now that is becoming kind of like the main project that they're looking at. And the interesting things about these ideas, as I said earlier, is it's not something which is appropriate for the changes that we've now got going on at the moment. It's rather investing in technology and ideas that will maintain the relevance in the future, because they'll offer people an alternative or a complementary way in which they can choose what products and services to kind of buy and how to use those different sorts of things. So again, you know, from your market point of view, is there anything along those lines coming up from your clients, or any examples where you can see that clients have really gone very, very quickly on accelerating some of their e-commerce propositions, or they've started to kind of integrate different ideas and form kind of new value propositions?
Yeah, talking about remote experiences, we're also now working on an initiative for McDonald's in Russia. It's especially designed for families, because families with kids are now especially going through hard times, and this divorce rates going up, and it's really hard. So especially given that in Russia a lot of families live really in a small apartments, and like 2 or 3 generations together, so it's really hard time. So what we're thinking about is to help parents organize their kids' birthdays remotely, so that they can invite their kids' friends in Zoom, and animator can also join, and we can deliver happy meals. So that's the whole immersive experience that the kid can have, and it's so helpful for parents. And another thing we are working with is this book reading initiative as well for McDonald's, because it's also they parents have hard times to entertain their kids, and many of them now just put the iPad and let their kids get just immersed with this hours and hours of video experience. So what we want to create for McDonald's is that truly together experience, so that parents can interact with kids and make their life easier. Just yeah, one of the examples.
Yeah, no, I think it's I read there was a stat from, I can't remember where I read it, but I think Nike were seeing a 30% increase in online sales, primarily attributed to the fact that they kind of integrated their fitness apps and training with their e-commerce kind of operations. And I think I've seen other organizations like fashion brands like Oliver Spencer and what have you have changed their online marketing and their emails and what have you to promote kind of loungewear and things of that nature, which is kind of obvious. But I think there's been sort of reports, at least in the UK press, about a number of those retailers like Next and what have you, who are really struggling, because economists often make a distinction between kind of delayed expenditure and kind of destroyed expenditure. So if a lot of people at the moment are not buying a new spring wardrobe because they're not going out and all the rest of it, then that would be kind of destroyed revenue for those organizations. And a lot of them are really struggling. And two of them went into administration in the UK yesterday. So it's interesting that those organizations who some time ago decided to invest in integrating the internal parts of an organization, the marketing aspects, the operational side of things, and the e-commerce side of things, are now benefiting disproportionately compared with those people that had a much more kind of siloed way. So if nothing else, this should be a wake-up call for those organizations that, whether they like it or not, they have now been pushed over the kind of digital Rubicon. And unless they find a way of very, very rapidly changing the way that their organization is unified from an internal point of view, they might not survive this, because it's likely that whilst lockdowns might be lifted, the World Health Organization and other sort of institutions like Johns Hopkins in the States are doing some really good work around what the data says about COVID. This could go on for another 12 months, 18 months or so, until we've finally got our vaccination program kind of up and running. So it almost goes back to the point I made earlier about, yes, there might be some short-term tactical things that a brand can do now, but really they should be looking at this as a long-term issue. This is not a short-term thing. This is a medium stroke kind of like long-term issue. So investment now is absolutely critical to make sure that when we come out of full kind of lockdown, when you have got behaviours which are more longitudinal around people's willingness to buy online, they're in a much better state of mind to take advantage of the significant of upturn in consumer expenditure. And I think just a case in point on that, there was another article that came out of China, and they used the expression kind of revenge shopping. And they were almost, people were going, I'm getting my revenge on COVID. I've been locked inside my house. So balls to you, virus. I'm going out shopping and I'm going to buy a new outfit and I'm going to go buy a new new guitar or whatever it happens to be. And consumer expenditure in those markets and those territories that were under lockdown for a number of months has actually gone through the roof. And the brands that are benefiting are those brands like Nike and Apple, who have got much more connected ecosystems within the organization and external. So it's a little bit of a kind of watch this space thing. But again, I'm wondering whether, again, from a Russian point of view, whether there are brands over in your market that seem to be that you think will be in a better place to benefit when the economy opens up again, compared with those organizations that are a little bit more siloed in the way that they are operationally constructed and the way that they can think about the nature of their business models.
Well, yeah, you could continue.
Yeah, one of the examples is that I think it's in our hands is to help brands to be in a good shape when everything gets back to the normal. And one of the initiatives that we also working on nowadays with our Volkswagen clients is it's called reunion with your car, or reuniting with your car. It's initiatives when we say that when you will be able to drive your car again and reunite with your car, we'll give you a free car wash. Yeah, so it's about getting traffic back to the car dealers, because dealers and car industry overall, it's now suffering a lot. No sales, only negative sales. Yeah, so the dealers definitely, it's offline business, right? And they need this traffic back. So what we did is we said, okay, so let's prepare to the time when everything gets back. So we will give everyone the free car wash when you start driving again.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It reminds me there was a report from our Hong Kong office that was published on LinkedIn earlier. If people are interested in it, I can send the link round or download the document. And it was looking at how quickly people had gone from being concerned about COVID to being concerned about the economy and going out there and spending. And I think one of the things that was consistent in Hong Kong, which I think is also consistent over here, was the number of people agreeing with the statement, I want to hear from brands, has increased by around about 25, kind of 30%. There was some research done a couple of weeks ago that DDB in the UK did with a research agency. I can't remember kind of who it was, but I can look it up. And again, I think depending on the generation, it was between sort of 20 to 30% increase in people saying, I want to hear from brands. Now, they didn't go into detail about why that was the case. So this is me kind of making things up to a degree, but I think they are looking for brands for help. They are looking for brands to maintain a sense of kind of normalcy. They are looking at brands to kind of help them adapt to the new temporary, at least, reality on the ground. And I think there's sort of the next thing, which is really kind of obvious, that I think we're now starting to see. Sometimes it's from brands like the Secret Cinema example I talked about, but it's also from kind of individuals who are recognizing that humans are fundamentally kind of social creatures. Our mental and physical, psychological well-being depends on how we function within social groups and complicated social groups. And that has been removed from us. So there's some really nice examples of individuals, I think, in the UK, less so kind of brands at the moment, who are coming up with ways of kind of bringing people together around kind of common interests and kind of passion things, so they feel more kind of connected. And there's one that there's a sort of comedian, Noel Fielding, who was in a TV program called The Mighty Boosh. He does an art club on Saturday. It's mainly for kids, but I join in as well, because he gets people to join kind of monsters and rock stars and all, so it's good fun. And then you upload it to Instagram, and there's loads of people kind of get involved and share their artwork and get into it. And then I think the other person who's come up with a brilliant idea, again, very, very simple, just using Twitter, is a chap called Tim Burgess, who's a singer in a band called The Charlatans. And he, for the last couple of weeks, he's been running a listening party. So he'll say, right, at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, press play on an Oasis album or a New Order record or a Suede record or what have you. And then he's arranged his sort of friends in the industry to kind of comment along on a track by track kind of basis, and then you can share your thoughts as well, and then the band can respond to them and go, oh, I didn't realize that. And it's a very, very simple idea, but again, it's something that has gone global. So it started in the UK, but last night I was listening to, I think it was a Libertines record, and they were looking at the number of people from around the world who were joining in, listening in at the same time. And as I said before, I think some of the really inventive ideas are not coming from brands rather than organizations. They're just coming from groups of individuals. But it will be interesting to see whether brands see that as an opportunity to devise new ways in which they can kind of add value, new ways in which they can enable people to establish new behaviors, and different ways in which they can kind of help each other. Less so, I think, perhaps from a functional point of view, more from an emotional, more from a psychological point of view. Because search for content has gone through the roof. I think broadcast content according to Barb has gone up by around about sort of 34%. And I think there's an astonishing increase in online content. It's around about in sort of 400, 500% kind of increase. And some of that is people saying, how do I cut my hair? Should I cut my hair during this time? But most of it's people looking for entertainment content. It's people wanting to take their mind off what's going on. It's people wanting to kind of forget everything and go back and connect. And the big increases in consumption seem to be around kind of nostalgia. It's around the albums you listened to when you were growing up. It's your favorite films from the 80s. And again, it's an interesting kind of trend that I'd be really interested in keeping an eye on, which is the development of kind of online cultures around people sharing memories and experiences around passion points.
But what's interesting there, Darren, and we were speaking about this last night, I think, you know, some of that media consumption has gone down, though. Streaming of music, for instance, some statistics suggesting that's going down. So interesting to see the polarity in that. Consumption of some media's gone up, some's gone down.
Yeah.
And I think we said, Alexandra, you said you've seen that in Russia as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Just, our examples of people connection maybe are not as positive and nostalgic. They're more about sex and alcohol and the dating issues. You know, one of the trends that we observed is that alcohol sales in Russia increased up to 31% after the COVID starts. So no wonder that Bars Online initiative was really welcome. And they are different bars that used to be offline that they created together, like a co-creation. The platform, which was called Stay the Fuck Home Bar. And that's an online bar platform where you can stay isolated and still connect with people you love. And it's pretty much like you know, phone sex. They say it's pleasant, safe, and disease-free. So actually numerous Russian bars joined the project and create parties and events online, and bartenders teach to mix cocktails, and they tell you that you need, you know, to prepare some ingredients, and then we can do it together. And there is even on this platform the digital bar hopping available. So you're free to hang out with everyone in the main bar lobby, so to say, in the room, or go to other ones with your friends if there is space, because it's only 12 people in one room. So basically they branded different bars, they branded different rooms as if it were actual bars. Yeah, and so it's an interesting initiative. And another thing about dating, well, you know, with these statistics, we saw like in Pornhub, it was like 57% increase in one day after self-isolation regime started. So it's like in comparison with the worldwide average 3.3%, ours was 57%. Just
wow. Yeah, there was on the Q&A channel, which is very exciting. We got one from Lynn Clark, who said, do you feel that brands have been pulling back from advertising spend, and do you think that will pick up again? Yes, I think a lot of brands are pulling back from advertising spend. The danger of that, actually, there's a lot of very, very good evidence from the IPA and people like Peter Field that study advertising effectiveness. And I think when they've looked at both generally and also what happened in previous recessions, those brands like Virgin Airlines, who maintained a brand spend at a reasonable level, actually I think Virgin increased it during the 2008 recession, they benefited disproportionately from a commercial return on investment after the recession itself. Whereas BA did the opposite. They dialed things down very significantly in terms of their media spend on advertising. And when when the recession kind of came out again, they had to spend a disproportionate amount on kind of brand building advertising in order to return back to the same levels of kind of demand and top of mind awareness and all of the rest of it. So some brands are forced into doing it because they've got to make short-term cuts. Anastasia mentioned the car industry is really struggling at the moment. So I think from a short-term cash flow point of view, I think reducing spend where they can legally pull out of media deals and what have you is absolutely going on. I think all of the evidence consistently says that brands that maintain spend during times such as this and other things like recessions, the ROI is disproportionately beneficial. And I think when we do come out of this, I think, yes, there will be a significant kind of increase in brands going back on television. The interesting thing, I suppose, will be making sure that the kind of the previous orthodox views of customers and what their needs were and what they wanted from brands and advertising is to see which of those have maintained and which of those have actually changed depending on how long this kind of goes on for. So I think one of the most important things that brands and businesses need to do on an individual basis, in addition to looking at the big picture, the macro view, which is coming from Ipsos and Kantar and Millward Brown and all of the rest of it, who are taking a very, very broad brushstroke view, is looking very, very specifically at the way that their customers' needs and preferences are changing and have changed, and track which of those become long-term changes to needs and kind of preferences and sensibilities. So that when you're then looking at what your current marketing plans are, both from a media point of view and I suppose from a kind of creative content point of view, do those things match up? Are some things that you might have planned currently inappropriate? Are there things that you need to modify? Are there new opportunities you can take in order to match whatever your products and services you're trying to sell with what these needs are, which might be new emergent needs, or there might be an increased need for a particular kind of element around psychological identity and so on. And that's one of the things that we've started to do with some of our clients at the moment is, again, as I said before, it's very early stage at the moment. We've only really been in lockdown for a couple of weeks or so. So you have to be very, very careful not to draw too many robust conclusions. But I think tracking it and see what happens over a period of time will be very, very important, particularly to make sure that when the lockdown ends, you don't just press go then on the advertising and the marketing. You've accumulated an audience, you've kept them with them through advertising and I think through other means as well. Because as I say, all the evidence points very robustly that if you maintain spend, you will benefit disproportionately to those organisations that have reduced their share of spend, their share of voice and what have you.
And if I may dovetail into that, Darren, as well, obviously I work a little bit more upstream with clients, perhaps before they've started working with us before. And certainly what I've experienced, Lynn, over the last few weeks is whereas sort of ad spend, for instance, may be getting reduced, I'm finding clients are shifting that spend into other areas as well. So, for instance, we're working with a national restaurant chain at the moment who are taking this opportunity whilst their restaurants are shut to do a complete UX and UI redesign across 48 web assets, which usually on a normal month could be quite disruptive to a brand like that. But they're taking the opportunity whilst they don't have any restaurants open to do that. Similarly, with a charity I'm working with at the moment who are re-platforming their entire website, again, could be quite a disruptive project to do. So they're taking the opportunity to do it. And it tends to be those sorts of projects that get procrastinated on, that kind of, they know it's there, but their focus is elsewhere, and they're using this as an opportunity to do that. So I would say there's probably, and there'd be some analysis to be done on this, after the fact, to see who reduced that spend flat out, and who might have been perceived they reduced that spend, but actually just shifted it elsewhere in the business. So I think that's really, I mean, Alexandra and Anastasia, what have you seen from clients over in Russia with regard to their spend?
Well, it's basically the same situation here. So almost every our client cut the spends, and we try to say the same thing, that those brands that don't cut it actually will benefit, and in the end of all this crisis. But the contra argument for this is that why do I advertise if there is no opportunity for people even to consume products? Yes, because it's a total lockdown, and you only can consume via delivery. So but I think that it's all about finding opportunity. Like for some of our clients, we try to find this way out within their business. Like, for example, for McDonald's, they have this drive-through and delivery, and so all their business money, so to say, they now go into these two things. So basically, what you need is to relocate the initially planned budgets from previously planned things to the new things. And thus, I think it's a great thing to sustain our investments, and at the same time not do things that are like sort of wasted. And
fantastic, super interesting. I mean, we've got 10 minutes left, so I wanted to just give some time just to some final thoughts. And one of the things that certainly I've been hearing from Darren and Alexandra and Anastasia over the last sort of 50 minutes has been that clearly the way that businesses need to engage customers has changed. We've become almost introverted. We are now locked in our houses, so we're not commuting out and around. The way our behaviours are online have changed. The way we're consuming media has changed. So what would you say to any of your clients, or indeed any other businesses for that matter, who come to you and say, it's all well and good, I understand that we need to help people through this, we need to perhaps change what we're saying, how we're saying it, but really tangibly today, how can brands really get in front of those customers in these changing behaviors, from what they perhaps were doing before? Maybe that's from a channel strategy perspective, or maybe that's from the type of media they're using. I'm not sure, maybe you've got some thoughts on that, but how can a brand really get in front of a customer today who is perhaps now locked in their house and can't leave, and how do they make sure that they are getting this helpful content in front of these people? And perhaps start with yourself, Alexandra and Anastasia, your thoughts as final thoughts on that. How can a brand really kind of engage customers now tangibly?
Well, the two things which I notice work the best now for the clients and for the brands is that they really make effort and go online, even if before that wasn't the case, and they collaborate to maybe collaborate with other brands who haven't been online, so that they sort of share the cost but still be able to deliver service to their clients. That's probably the most open thing. Or we have educational platforms which opened trial for free for the period of the lockdown, so that people could try their courses and then maybe stay with them if they would like it.
And obviously there is no one silver bullet for everyone. So what we do is for every business, for every client, we suggest a customized approach, and trying to find out the unique opportunity within every business. So and there is obviously one for every client. Yeah. So it's there, unfortunately, yeah, there is no one like magic pillow that you say, do this and that will help. Yeah, it's not like this. So
and Darren, from your perspective with the clients that we're helping over here in the UK, someone comes to say, I want to get this media in front of my customers and this content in front of my customers. How can I really do this in this changing behaviours? What would you say to a client?
Well, I think I sort of mentioned that there's a number of kind of key questions or things that you need to be looking at. The first thing, as I said before, which is critical, which is assess and reassess the needs and the preferences of your particular audience at the moment. So have those orthodoxies remain in terms of what they thought about your particular brand, the role that the brand played in your life and what have you. I mean, talking about it from more of a brand building point of view rather than maybe selling a specific product like a holiday or a what have you, because like Anastasia said, you can't buy those at the moment. But as we talked about earlier, during the last recession when people weren't flying, Virgin won, I don't know whether they won the Grand Prix at the IPA Awards, but they certainly won kind of like gold for the way that they maintained the brand during a recession, even though people were significantly less likely to actually book a holiday and book what have you. They came out at the other side. The second thing that I think they need to do is look at their existing creative and communication strategy. So, and this is more, I suppose, from a tone of voice point of view, is do we need to modify and adapt what we're saying and how we're saying different sorts of things? We certainly need to review the media plan. As I said before, consumption of all media has generally kind of gone up. I think the BARB figures that came up recently are people's consumption of broadcast television, so traditional television, has gone up by at least 35–40%. And I think I did write it down sort of somewhere because it was a huge amount. I think there was, that was it, yeah. So online content search has gone up by 534%, according to Captive Research. And that came out a couple of days ago. And 45% of people are spending more time on social media across Facebook, et cetera, and that comes from a report that kind of Kantar came out. So there's been a massive increase in people's consumption of content, and a lot of that content is entertainment content. So I don't think it would be that difficult to revise your media plans based on the new kind of consumption media habits that people have got. I think that there's also a thing around clients it is a difficult one because of restrictions on social distancing or whatever about generating new content. But a lot of brands are, rather than having to produce advertising and content that is of broadcast quality, they're getting away with being a little bit more loose with the quality, and they're using animations and they're looking kind of like stock footage and things of that nature and sound design and what have you to create content that seems to fit quite naturally across different social channels. You know, I don't need to see something that has been produced by Industrial Light and Magic on Twitter, for example. You can get away with something that is appropriate and sensitively tuned. And again, I think it's just brands being sensitive and appropriate, understanding their audience needs, not overstepping the mark. And also sometimes it's okay not to say anything. I think, as I said before, right at the very beginning of this conversation, there was a couple of brands that demonstrated a little bit of a tin ear because they felt they had to go out there and comment on what was going on. And there was quite a lot of pushback. There was quite divisive from a lot of people about whether those brands were saying something that was actually adding any meaning value, or also whether they were being opportunistic as well, which is something else brands need to look out for. Is they can't be seen to be taking advantage of this situation. So again, there's always a requirement to be sensitive and understand people and their needs and their preferences and so on. But I think it's particularly important that brands are more attuned to kind of what's going on at the moment, even if what's going on with the lockdown is temporary and things will return back to normal in the future. But I think those are the things they need to do. It starts, as always, it should do, with really understanding people and what makes them tick and what's going on, and then everything else really kind of cascades out from there.
Really interesting, Darren. Thank you for that. So we're almost at time. So conscious of everybody's time. I don't want to sort of go over because everyone has a hard stop. So no, I think everyone will agree with me in saying it's been really interesting hearing from you three today. Not just from a UK perspective, but also from Russia's perspective as well, and really interesting to see the similarities as well. In the consumer behaviours we're seeing, which I hope is reassuring for those brands that have that global presence. And ultimately need to be aware of the nuances between geographies there. Thank you all for giving up your time today and listening to us for an hour. Hopefully you found it interesting and maybe picked up a few points. And thank you for the questions as well. What I will say is this is the start of a series of these where we're going to kind of be following this thought track through. I'm sure you would have received those links in the email communications you've had and prior to this webinar, and you'll receive as a follow-up for attending today as well. So please do go on and register, and hopefully you'll find some of the other topics we'll be discussing interesting. We've also produced a podcast series which you can find on all popular channels, including Apple and Spotify. So feel free to log in and have a listen to our podcasts as well. And we've also got even a Slack channel which we'll invite you all to, which you can collaborate with your peers from around industries as well. It's all really about sort of bringing people together, coming together as a community, because I think the only way we're all going to get through this is together. So also please follow Tribal Worldwide London on LinkedIn and use the hashtag Total Experience as well if you want to share any thoughts from today. And really hope to see you at some of our future talks. So I'll let you all get on with your day, go grab some lunch and enjoy some sunshine, hopefully. A special thank you to Alexandra and Anastasia from joining from Russia, and thank you very much for your thoughts there. And Darren, thank you very much as well for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll let everyone go now. So thank you and have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.